So, hello everyone. My name is Andrey Hihlovskiy. Today we will talk about Gretty, managing web containers with Gradle. First of all, just a couple of words about myself. I am a software engineer from Germany. At my main job, I work for a small software company called Startext GmbH, located in Bonn. We develop software for archives and museums in Germany. And here I perform as a contributor to open source community and as an author of Gradle plugins. One of these plugins is Gretty, and today we will learn how you can benefit from using Gretty. So we will structure our time the following way. First of all, I will tell you a little story, how I came to the idea that the world needs another Gradle plugin for web containers. Then we will make an overview of features that Gretty supports. And then we will go a little bit into detail. I will show you use case scenarios and configuration parameters. So let's get started. You can ask me questions anytime you feel like asking questions. Okay? So first, my story. So I joined web application development in year 2010. I was handed over a bunch of web applications done with such frameworks as Cocoon and XTF. Did anybody of you worked with Cocoon? No? Did you hear about Cocoon? No? Okay, then it's already software archaeology, I think. So the projects that I was given, they were in quite bad shape. They were, first of all, these were projects without automation. And these were simply Eclipse configurations with a bunch of jar files and some source code. There was no way to do continuous integration on this project or to do testing. All was kind of chaotic. So that brought me to the idea that we need to automate things. And in year 2011, we moved our web applications to Maven. So at that time, it was great progress. At last, we could compile our web applications from command line, not only from Eclipse. Then we could test them and do some other interesting things. And then in year 2013, I discovered Gradle for myself. And my first reaction was, wow, such a great tool. You can do much more and with much smaller configurations as with Maven. So my excitement was all about Gradle-driven ecosystem. It's really great. You have so many Gradle plugins there. Some of them are part of Gradle distribution. Some you find on the internet. And there are, of course, very powerful frameworks that are not directly related to Gradle, but they are available. They are there because you will be using JCenter or Maven Central repositories. After this first excitement a bit receded, I started to ask questions. So my first question was, how can I run my web applications on Jetty 9? So I needed Jetty 9 because of more modern servlet API. So I tried to find answers on Gradle forums, and I discovered I'm not the only one who has the problem. Gradle, as it is, supports two old versions of Jetty. It was, I think it was, and it is version 6 still. So then the next problem was, how do I do integration testing with Gradle? There are some recipes on the internet. There are some pieces of code you can copy and paste into your Gradle configurations. But I wanted something else. I wanted very succinct and elegant solution so that I can run my integration tests with as little effort on configuring them as possible. Then, how do I deliver microservices? Another big question. I want to develop not one web application, but say a dozen. And I want to debug them in the same environment and do integration tests on the whole thing, not on one service. So all these questions brought me 1 year ago to the idea we need Gretty. So at first I had no clear idea what it should be. I just had feeling we need super duper Gradle plugin that makes us all happy, that makes web application development easy, kind of this thing. And well, I started with some little things. 1 year passed. 1 year later, Gretty is already quite mature product. It supports a lot of features. For example, hot deployment. Surely you must know what hot deployment means. You change your code, you expect that your web application picks up these changes. Then integration tests, clear. You want your web server to start before the test and stop after the test. Then code coverage. You want to do code coverage not only for the server side, but also for your tests. Then debugger support. I want to debug multiple web applications, not only one. Then, well, security realms. Here I must confess its support of security realms is very basic. Gretty supports only in-memory security realms. So probably it's not suitable for production, but it's okay for development time. And then these features that I'm proud of, multiple web containers. Gretty supports Jetty 7, 8, 9, and Tomcat 7, 8. I will show you how you can select servlet container. Then multiple web apps. This is the following. You can take a bunch of web applications, run, debug, configure, and even deliver them as a package. Product generation means you can generate a self-contained package that contains all necessary libraries, including servlet container or web container, and including configuration files. And Gretty provides first-class Spring Boot support. That means any Spring Boot application can be integrated into Gretty infrastructure with as little effort as possible. I will show it later. What does it mean exactly? Let's get started with Gretty. How you can use it? Very simple. Put these lines in your build Gradle, and then invoke task app run. You are done. Your web application is already running. What happens actually, the Gretty plugin will configure servlet container for you. The default is Jetty 9, and it will feed class path, resources, everything to that servlet container. What is important to note that uprun does not build var file. It runs in place. This is essential for accelerating things a little bit. Done. Briefly, let's talk about Gretty tasks. One I have already shown. This is uprun. Then there is task uprun debug. I think it's clear what it does. It starts your web application in debug mode. There are parameters how you can fine-tune debugging. I will show it later. Then uprun var, clear. First it builds var file for you, then runs this var file on the embedded servlet container. And then the list goes on and on. There are overall more than 40 tasks provided by Gretty. All tasks are documented. Documentation is available online. And I'm proud to say that documentation is in a very good shape. Every little feature, every task is documented, and you get complete information on the side effects, on prerequisites, on everything. If you occasionally discover some dark corners, then please tell me. I will be correcting this in the documentation. Now, let's say we want to configure Gretty. How do we do that? With the DSL syntax. Just put this section Gretty into your build script, and then assign some properties. Let's say we want to change HTTP port and context path. Yeah, it's very easy to do so. Of course, it's not the only properties you can change. There are dozens of other properties. For example, you can set up HTTPS support the way you like, or you can configure realms, and so on and so on. All documented. So now this sweet part, switching web containers. At first, when I started developing Gretty, I took more traditional path. Gretty actually was consisting of specialized Gradle plugins. Each plugin was kind of bound to concrete servlet container. Like there was Gradle plugin for JT7, for JT8, JT9, and so on. But then I realized that maybe it's not the right way to do so. Let's hide it all behind and give users a very simple property that will switch servlet containers. As you see, the property is called servlet container, and you can assign it to one of these values. So it's that simple only on the surface. In the background, a lot of things happen. And Gretty actually was done with a special architecture to enable this servlet container switching. Particularly, I separated the Gretty plugin from so-called Gretty runners. Gretty plugin provides you with DSL and tasks. So it's facade that you see as a plugin user. Gretty runner are specialized components which are bound to concrete implementation of web container. All these runners have uniform interface so that Gretty plugin can handle them the same way. A Gretty runner is being chosen dynamically at runtime when you set this servlet container property. Now let's get to hard deployment. Yeah, very briefly, hard deployment is enabled by default, and I tried my best to supply hard deployment with reasonable defaults. Like what is scanned? Your web app folder is scanned for hard deployment. Main source set is scanned. If you change some sources, Java files, in main source set, it will be recompiled and the web application will restart. And scan interval is set to 1 second by default. Of course, you can configure hard deployment. There are properties for it, like you see this scan interval. Scan dir means you want to add some non-standard directory containing the code. Fast reload means you want to add directory containing resources. Resources are not causing your application to recompile. They are simply copied into running application. Then managed class reload. This is nice feature, can save you a lot of time. Did any one of you work with Spring Loaded library? Wonderful.
That was my question, actually.
Yes? Spring Loaded is an open source Java library that works inobtrusively with your program, can be added as a Java agent to your program, and it augments class loading in your project that way that whenever classes are changed in the file system, they are dynamically reloaded in memory without restarting your application.
And the
Exactly.
Whereas usually the JVM will just do it, hit it,
Yeah.
restart. And
Right.
It's really nice.
It's the basis for reloading of Gradle, so it has a lot of mileage behind it. It's tested.
Yeah.
And it's cheaper than JWeb.
Right, right. So here, Gretty does not implement this custom class reloading. It actually delegates all work to Spring Loaded. But you have very convenient property by which you can turn off and on this feature. You might ask when you will need to turn it off. Very easy. There are cases when this will not work. When, for example, your application does heavy manipulation with class loading, it might be the case that Spring Loaded will not work. By default, Spring Loaded is disabled. So you have to enable it explicitly. Okay, now we go to next interesting topic, integration tests. So with integration tests, Gretty suggests you separation of labor. You, as plugin users, you write this part, you write integration tests. And integration tests for Gretty is some code that exists as a Gradle task and is probably sending some requests to the server. Then what part of labor is on the Gretty side? Gretty generates these two tasks, before integration test, after integration test. All what it does, it's simply start web container, stop web container. And Gretty does it inobtrusively. You don't have to do anything. You simply implement this task and you invoke it on the command line. That's it. Here I show concrete example how you can implement integration test task. There are many ways how you can do that, but this is the way how I do it, and it works for me. So there is already existing task test in Gradle. When we, for example, use Java plugin or Groovy or Scala plugin, we slightly modify this task. We exclude all modules that contain IT suffix in the file name. IT for me stands for integration test. And quite logically, we include these files in our new integration test task. So how these IT modules or integration test modules could look like? It can be anything. You can use any framework or, I don't know, library to communicate to your server. It can be Apache HTTP client. It can be Groovy's HTTP builder. Or my favorite is Geb framework. So did any one of you worked with Geb framework? No? Okay, you worked.
Did you know one of the Gradle guys?
Yeah. So I would highly recommend using Geb framework for the cases when you want to test your web application against a real browser. You want to start a real browser as part of your test. You want to click some buttons in an automated way, send requests from these buttons to the server, and then check the result. Geb is ideal for these cases. How you implement a Geb-based integration test module? All you have to do is extend this specification, Geb reporting spec, and then you write your test functions. Test functions follow this when-then metaphor of Spoke. Please learn about Spoke framework on the network. How Gretty helps you writing such classes. Gretty injects certain properties into system environment of the running test so that you stay independent of the exact host name and port name where your server is running. So that gives comparable portability to your tests. Then, now we come to code coverage. There was a funny story with this. One guy approached me at GitHub and asked, does Gretty support Jacoco? So I was completely blank. I asked, what is Jacoco? I have no idea. So then just I was curious, read a little bit about this. Okay, it's a Java library. You can attach it to your web application as a Java agent. And it gives you nice reports in form of HTML pages or XML files about code coverage in your program. So I thought, oh wow, this is great. Let's integrate it. So what Gretty does with Jacoco, it provides support for server-side and client-side code coverage. Server-side is clear. You want to know which controllers were tested. And client-side means you want to see which tests actually were run during, for example, during integration testing. Maybe you disabled some tests and forgot to enable them back. So now we come to debugging support. Gretty provides two properties, debug port, debug suspend, which allow you to fine-tune how the debugger starts. Debug port is necessary because debugging port is different from one IDE to another. And debug suspend is necessary because sometimes you want your application, web application, to be started in suspended mode and debug its initialization sequence. And sometimes you are absolutely not interested in this. You want to debug something that happens much later, say some methods in controllers. Then you certainly should turn it off, debug suspend mode. Now, next part, security realms. As I told you, support of security realms is very basic in Gretty, probably not suitable for production. These are in-memory security realms. You will want to use the database for storing your usernames and passwords, or some custom libraries that do it much better. But there is syntax allowing you to enable security realms. So with a realm config file for Jetty, you specify properties file, and the realm config file for Tomcat, you specify XML file, this infamous Tomcat users XML. Now we come to big part, Gretty Farms. So it's the following. Let's say we have a bunch of web applications and we want to treat them as a whole. They are part of one big thing. For example, these are microservices that belong to one project. We want to start them all at the same time, to test them all at the same time, how to manage them. For that, Gretty provides concept of the farm. Farm is a constellation of web applications that are to be treated as a whole. You are free to define your own farms. There could be multiple. Or there is a so-called configureless mode. I will show it how configureless mode works on the next slide. Then Gretty Farms support single sign-on. They are debuggable. You can do integration tests and code coverage, everything. First, simplest case with Gretty Farms, configureless configuration. All you have to do is create hierarchical structure with the projects. There is a root project and there are sub-projects. Sub-projects are containing your web applications. Would it be RESTful services or web applications with the UI? And then you run this special task, farm run, not on the sub-projects, but on the root project. What Gretty will do, it will recognize that you want to run a set of web applications. It will scan all sub-projects, find which of them are web applications, and run them as a whole. And there is syntax for defining your own farms. You define farm by adding farm section, and then you call this web app function. Here I show variety of parameters that WebApp function accepts. The first line, WebApp project, means the current project where the farm is defined is already a web application. Then here we use project path syntax to address other projects in the same project tree. Here we use file path. File path can be relative or absolute. It's up to you. And finally, web application can come even from Maven repository. For example, you have your corporate Nexus or Artifactory repository, and there some web applications are published. They will be downloaded and used as part of the farm. Single sign-on with Gretty Farm. It is controlled by a single Boolean property, single sign-on equals true. By default, of course, it's false. The effect of single sign-on is the following. Whenever one of the web services gets authenticated, all other web services will be accessed with the same authentication token. Single sign-on feature in Gretty is based on what Jetty and Tomcat provide out of the box. Some people would say they are not satisfied with that. Of course, you may find 1,000 other libraries that implement single sign-on technology on the internet. Now, debugging Gretty Farm. It's trivial. It's nothing complicated here. Same two properties, debug port, debug suspend. And you have to run special task for it, farm run debug. Then your whole farm is already under the debugger. You can step line by line through the source code and so on. Integration tests on Gretty Farms. Here it gets a little bit different from integration testing on the single web application. First similarity, similarly to single web application case, you have to implement your integration tests in the web services. The distinction is the following. You never should run this from the command line. Instead, you run this special task, farm integration test. Farm integration test first detects which farm you want to run, and then it ensures that web container is started before the first web application in the sequence and stopped after the last one. Regrettably, right now we don't have any parallelism here of integration tests. They will be executed one by one. It's simply nobody asked for any kind of parallelism. Maybe function for the future. So now we come to Gretty products. Let's deliver our web applications. We want to make our delivery as simple as possible. We want it to do it with Gradle task, and we deliver multiple web applications as a self-contained configurable package. How we do that? We invoke a Gretty task build product for it. Here I show how the generated file structure looks like. As you see here, we have configuration. In the configuration, there is a JSON file with the parameters that were generated from your Gretty configuration. Then there are some runtime supports libraries. And then there is a web apps folder that might be familiar for you from Tomcat world. We have web apps folder and then a set of web applications. And there is a set of startup scripts. The scripts with names start and stop are ready to be integrated in some operating system startup sequence. So what is essential about Gretty products? It's standalone, as I said. Web container is already included. Would it be Jetty or Tomcat? Your web applications are packed as WAR files. And there is a configuration saved to JSON. And of course, you can configure your Gretty products. In a very similar fashion to Gretty Farms, you can specify product configuration. And you can even define multiple products. Like one product could be for one customer, another one for another. I don't know, it's your scenarios for that. And same syntax for web app function in the context of product section. Gretty and Spring Boot support. Very simple, single property, no effort, we are done. Spring Boot, true, that's it. But there is a lot of what is happening in the background. Actually, Gretty adds Spring Boot libraries to your project, it's first. Second, it configures embedded web container with the properties that you have defined in Gretty configuration or that were provided by default in Gretty configuration. So how Gretty and Spring Boot combine? They combine one to another wonderfully. Everything that you could have done with usual web applications, with var files, you can do also with Spring Boot applications. Like you can have multiple web containers. You can switch between web containers. You can do hot deployment and integration tests. So all this is also applicable to Spring Boot. Moreover, you can actually deliver Spring Boot and non-Spring Boot web applications in the same product or in the same farm. It's also possible. So in this sense, I say that Spring Boot applications are first-class citizens for Gretty. And I'm proud to say that probably Gretty is doing better job at supporting Spring Boot than Spring Boot's own Gradle plugin. So the list of options here is, I think it's unique. So we are nearing the end of my presentation. So here are coordinates where you can get Gretty. It's available on the GitHub. Here is the documentation that you can read. And then all versions of Gretty are available at Gradle plugin portal, at JCenter, at Maven Central. Gretty is here for you for a long time. Please be assured. I will be glad to accept any kinds of contributions or help with this project. Come to GitHub and give your pull requests, raise issues, communicate with me. I'm open to that. So again, my name is here. I'm Andrey Hihlovskiy. Here's my handle at GitHub, my email, my Twitter handle. Contact me anytime. Do you have any questions? Yes. Oh, sorry.
Okay. When you apply the Gradle for some of the containers, so you don't specify where to get those containers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And where are you getting them?
Okay.
Where are you putting them?
Yeah, very good question. Question is how Gretty, from where Gretty gets this embedded web containers. 3 versions of Jetting, 2 versions of Tomcat. It's very easy. These servlet containers are available at Maven Central and at JCenter. They are actually Maven artifacts. And it's possible even to use them without Gretty. You can just simply use them in any other application. But Gretty provides you high level of automation about this. You don't see all these mechanics from where all containers are downloaded, how they are assembled, how they are configured. Yes?
So, yeah, as you pointed out at the beginning, there's a legion of attempts at plugins to do Tomcat and container management and all that.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about yours because it's by far the most comprehensive and seemingly
Thank you.
But to your last point, you know, about pull requests and engagement of the community,
Yeah.
because this is a lot of stuff. Who is using this plugin?
Okay.
Who we're comfortable with you saying?
Yeah. It's the following. First, I developed this plugin for my own needs, and at the beginning it was simple. I needed only 2 features. I needed this multiple web containers, ability to switch between them, and multiple web applications. That was all that I needed. I was completely happy with that. Then I thought that probably people will like this and they will really find it useful. So I gave it through GitHub. Then came the whole wave of excitement and requests, and I didn't expect that. People were starting to generate ideas. So what I did, I was simply implementing somebody else's ideas. That's it. So right now we have, I think, 8 contributors, including me in Gretty. So it's actively developed project. I release new versions, well, let's say once a month, sometimes once in two weeks when something important is coming. So, and as I said, you can always contact me, suggest something. I'll be happy to hear from you.
Are you pretty active, since you support Spring Boot, are you pretty active with the Spring Boot community?
Yes, I contributed to Spring Boot. Particularly, I asked Spring Boot colleagues to provide me some interfaces to make this integration frictionless. I'm very happy. They were very friendly and they responded to this. So, questions? Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for your time.